It's the week of February 19th, 2018, and you're listening to the Pioneer GrowingPoint Agronomy podcast. Today we discuss variety selection and pre-plant field planning. We also welcome special guest Chad Greenway to the show. I'm your co-host, DuPont Pioneer Field Agronomist Josh Shofner. With me is DuPont Pioneer Field Agronomist Brian Buck. This is episode 1 of 2018. Welcome back, listeners.
Well, Josh, it's great to be back on the air again after taking the winter off here. And for the first time ever, we've actually taken the show on the road today. So we're airing live in Welch, Minnesota, which has been a fun change of pace. And beyond that, we actually have the opportunity to have Chad Greenway on our show today. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thank you. Always good to be on with, or first time to be on with you guys, but always fun to be a part of these things and learn a little bit more about where I came from, how I came to be at a Pioneer podcast in Welch, Minnesota, and looking forward to discussing that.
Yeah, Chad, certainly we would like to get a little bit of your background. Some of our audience knows obviously your professional career, but what a little bit about your farming and your career after football?
Well, I can't say too much because my keynote's in a little bit, but I think the important thing to know is I grew up in Mount Vernon, South Dakota, small town, farming community, really my whole background and livelihood, my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, all farmers. Corn, soybeans, winter wheat, livestock, pigs, and cattle. So I escaped, to go to the University of Iowa and escape the hard work. But I really credit kind of my whole football career, whether it be in college or pro, to that work ethic, that mentality that I was able to kind of have coming from a farm. And now that I'm done with my NFL career, really looking to circle back, kind of get back into the farming world, and Pioneer's been great to kind of let me do that and help me out.
Yeah, so we got a live audience. We do got about 350, 400 people here, and it was a little quiet before we started the show, so we're going to get a little bit of interaction here with the crowd. So we want to hear a little noise, a little cheering. Where's our Packer Nation out there?
That's pretty loud.
All right, where's our Minnesota Viking fans? All right, you're wedged between two Viking fans, just to help that out.
To not be forgotten, Detroit Lion fans. Might want to grab them a beer.
There are too. Seems like most of the Packer fans are kind of stationed here. Maybe more the Vikings fans over there. It's like they just innately did that.
Yeah.
They just kind of separate, like a smell. I'm not sure which one smells, but
I think we know. So as we get started here, we're like Josh said in the opening, we're gonna talk variety selection and also some pre-plant field planning today. So first topic to hit on is a little around variety selection. So Chad, when you think about like your operation back in South Dakota, or when you're planting hybrids field by field, what are maybe some characteristics you look for in a hybrid?
Yeah, I had to preface when I was talking to these guys, for our live audience, when we were talking about, prepping for these questions and like this question, variety selection. I've not a farming for a long time, so I'm not going to rattle off a bunch of numbers at you and tell you what bags I'm using. But what I do know is specifically for the farms where I've purchased and now I'm farming, whether it be custom farming or I'm now renting, hoping to be custom farming those soon. A little more drought, areas, mostly in South Dakota, a lot of sand, gravel based, and something my parents have dealt with forever. So that's probably number one for me, is just kind of looking at that, what products are able to kind of survive longer, do better under those conditions.
Yeah, and Brian, when you kind of look at, the group here in Wisconsin and southeast and central, southern Minnesota, when you look about corn, what's kind of your take of what we're looking for variety selection as we prep for planting season?
Yeah, if I look at it as a whole, every field's different. Every operation you get on, there's going to be maybe a different product that's the right fit. But looking at the big area and maybe just putting it all into one bucket, for me, the first thing you got to look at is yield. You might have a product that's perfect on agronomics, but if it's 20 bushel off the base, it might not be the right product for you. So at the end of the day, yield's always number one for me. After that, traits is a big thing. In the area we cover, we do run into quite a bit of rootworm. You can't forget about corn borer, maybe some of those herbicide technologies that you can have out there also. So if you are corn on corn or whatever it may be, making sure you have the right trait on that farm is really important. After that, I always go to, looking at that field history and what's there been for disease. So has it been northern corn leaf blight or Goss's wilt? Those are the two big ones for me in those categories. If you have Goss's wilt, that's not protected by a fungicide, so you need to make sure you have the right hybrid picked right out of the gate. Northern corn leaf blight, you can help manage it with a fungicide. So depending on that, that's important too. Last two things, standability, always there if you're going to be maybe later to harvest. And then the last thing is dry down. Depending on the operation, drying setup, or whatever it may be, dry down's really important too.
Yeah, and when you think about soybeans, shifting gears here a little bit, it's a very similar approach. And when it comes to corn and soybeans, we think about variety selection and issues that we see. I always like to say, what are the 3 or 4 things in my operation that can impact yield at a big level? 20, 30 bushel. You think about white mold and soybeans, northern corn leaf blight. But I'm kind of a believer when we think about those things, if it's predictable, it's preventable. And that prevention of those things that come rob yield, it's got to start with variety selection. And with soybeans, with Wisconsin, Minnesota here, white mold is always going to crawl to the top. Something that, we see 20, 30 bushel beans from white mold, and certainly variety selection is huge when controlling that disease. Same as we think about soybean cyst nematodes, we think about IDC to the west. Variety selection is step 1 to make sure we get those things right. And certainly, SDS showing up, getting that right variety, looking at seed treatment, things like that as well. But certainly, it all starts with variety selection. I think about service calls we go on. Everyone in this room goes on service calls, and it's not uncommon that we get there. It's like, oh, variety maybe wasn't quite what we're looking for, and we always just want to make sure we get that right out of the gate and make sure we make sure we get step 1 before we think about the other areas of crop protection.
Whether it's corn or soybeans, either way, the biggest thing is just knowing the field that you're going to place that product on and what the challenges could be.
I'm going to make sure I preface that I don't know most of the terms you guys just said. I'm probably about 50% on that, so obviously a lot to learn yet. So I need to kind of get with some people out here that can teach me.
Oh, that's what we're all here for, is teach along the way. And Chad, one other thing around variety selection, think about field planning. I know you've had a little bit of experience with Encirca Field Planner here with your time with Pioneer. What are the advantages when you think about having that plan in place? And again, we're talking about planning plans, but really in other things, having that plan in place is step 1 to making sure execution is where it needs to be.
Yeah, I think Encirca is huge for me. I think the one thing that I got excited about when working with Pioneer was you realize what you can do remotely. I think for me, sort of this next-gen farmer, I live in the Twin Cities. None of my farms are there. I have them kind of scattered all across western Minnesota, into South Dakota, some kind of in Mount Vernon, in the area where I grew up. So all those fields are really different and need different things. And for me to kind of transition those all back to controlling those farms, Encirca's kind of gave me the freedom to do that, where I didn't really know how I was going to be able to make that connection with having 4 kids and being busy in the cities and also doing that without being out there full time. So this allows me to have a little bit more flexibility, and quite honestly, it didn't even cross my mind until I started working with Pioneer that this would be possible. So I think, I'm sure a lot of you guys out there are using this technology for your own farms, but I just think it's so valuable. And I think much like technology in every realm of our life, this is going to go from here 0 to 100 quick, and it's going to get obviously much better. And I think that the nice thing is more interactive. So that's the part that I really love. And the other thing is I can be involved day to day, and that's something that you can't do unless you're physically there all the time. So this really helps.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit, I know you mentioned custom farming a little bit, and I can think of a plan where, even in my experience, where you got someone on there and say, heat of the battle, something changes, having that plan in place that whether he calls you or other people, hey, it's on the field plan, it's in the app or whatever, making sure everyone's seeing that same thing. That's got to be a huge, kind of insurance policy for you to know that if you got that plan in place, that execution should go kind of without any problems along the way.
Yeah, and plans do change. I think back to last spring, and last spring maybe got a little later than we all hoped. We had some tough weather that came in there. You start thinking about field plans. A lot of the times, the person running the planter, or the person getting the seed, or the person doing whatever may not be the person that bought the seed or knows for sure where it goes. So if you start putting some of those plans together and you have them in place, it can just really mitigate the errors that can be made in the heat of the moment in that springtime when things can be changing rapidly, or day to day things can, maybe you're not in the planter and you plan to be, and somebody else is delivering that seed. So getting things in the right place is really important.
Yeah, and I always kind of, you mentioned traits when you're talking about corn, Brian, and I always think about corn traits, and southeast Minnesota, a lot of our area, corn rootworm is a big deal. And when I'm doing field planning, I always remind a grower, as soon as the corn planter leaves the field, your rootworm plan is set for the year. And every year I get 2 or 3 calls where, wrong hybrid on that field, we didn't have the traits we thought we did, but we made a mistake, grabbed the wrong seed from the shed, and with a good pre-plant field plan, those things can be avoided, and hopefully those planting mistakes, which it's just frustrating when you leave the field and you got a big season-long mistake already, and those are the things we just got to avoid.
Yeah, but when you think about field plans, I always think, return on investment or things you do put forth on your farm. It's something that's free. It's not like it's a big input cost or something like that. It's really just planning. So it can maybe save you some money on the backside, though, from having that plan in place and not having to maybe do a rescue treatment of whatever it may be to fix that misplaced product or whatever it could be.
So the million-dollar question, Chad, you got your planning plan done?
We do. Yeah, we do. At this point, we're really only custom on 2 places, so it's pretty small. And again, it's a start for me. And I think the biggest thing that Encirca helps me with is education. I can learn so much from the app based off just my soil type, what we need, where it needs to be, and then obviously just grow that education and kind of learn, because some of these pieces, I didn't grow up around them. I haven't farmed them for a long time, don't have a big history on them. So I think that's the part that I'm really excited about, is continue to learn that and just seeing how it can improve kind of year to year.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, so looking at the podcast and moving forward here for the next year, we're going to do, this is the first episode of a 5-part series. So the following 4 Mondays, we're actually going to go live at noon every day. So this will be the first of 5 total, and every noon, or noon on Mondays, the next 4 Mondays, we'll also be going.
Absolutely. I always think, Brian, it's important to know where people can find our podcast.
I'm at FarmerBuck1 on Twitter, where you can find it.
Yeah, I am at Josh Shofner.
So you guys gonna put me on the podcast too every time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're
At
welcome.
Chad Greenway 52 is where you can find me. So then you just tweet me, guys.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll make sure to listen to it every week.
We will do that. You can also find our podcast on iTunes. You can go to podcast.pioneer.com, and you can subscribe to the RSS feed from there.
Otherwise, on YouTube, if you put in keyword either of our names with Pioneer, it'll also pop up.
Absolutely. So, well, that's kind of coming to a wrap of the show. We certainly want to thank Chad Greenway for coming on.
Yeah.
We appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is fun, and I think the fun part for me is like I didn't know this existed, right? So like the more you come and be around things like this, you can kind of see what else is out there to just learn something else about a trade that for me that I'm getting back into and understanding. So I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Well, Josh, that's a wrap for episode 1 of 2018. This show is recorded in Welch, Minnesota. It is produced by Brian Buck and Josh Shofner. Thanks for listening, and be sure to tune in next time.